Centenary year celebrating former President Nelson Mandela's life and struggle. Jacana have published a book that acknowledges his life in a very different format. In short stories from more than 100 men and women who have written their memories of him. They range from high-profile politicians to household staff, amongst others. Joining us to discuss I Remember Nelson Mandela are the two editors of the book, Vimla Naidoo and Sahm. It's so good to have both of you in studio. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
I've been transported into another world this morning. You know, sometimes you get wrapped up in all of these issues in your head and you sort of lose a little bit of direction. But these are these short little stories of lessons learned from people that worked with this great man. And some of them are just, they are so moving and profound. So that's just my little word up front. I needed to get that off my chest now. But let's begin with you. Vimla, talk to us. I know that this indeed was Graça Michel's idea. So how did it all come about? Did she approach you? What was the process?
Soon after Madiba passed away in 2014, Mrs. Michel wanted an opportunity to meet with staff who had worked for Madiba. And so we convened these teas with his protection detail, household staff, presidency and foundation staff. And during these teas, Mrs. Michel had an opportunity to thank people for the role they played in Madiba's life, for supporting him through the years. Yeah. And at the end of these teas, people then started to share their memories of Madiba. And Mrs. Michel said to us at the foundation that we should capture them. We shouldn't lose these stories so that 50 years from now, people would see this side of Madiba and remember this side of Madiba.
Yeah, and what a side it is to remember, because as Graça Michel says in the foreword of this book, his human side could so easily have been forgotten. And, you know, that's something, because you looked at the leader side of him, but there was that other side, that leadership side. Talk to us about speaking to people, hearing their stories, and letting them pen down some of those most profound moments that they spent with them.
Well, I think that each one of these people could do a book on their own. Yeah. They have so many amazing memories with Madiba. And what became very clear to us is they really loved him. They're very funny moments, quite poignant and sad ones as well. But there's one we talk about all the time, about the bodyguards who ran over his lunch and killed his chicken that was about to be killed. But really beautiful, touching things that nobody else would have seen about Madiba.
Yeah, and that's what's nice, because these are just things that people noted. I mean, there was one, there's one story, and I'm not sure who it was, but I gathered it was from, it was either one of his guards or somebody, where there was he'd had a blood test, and suddenly he took the plaster off, and there was a little bit of blood, and Madiba started losing it. He was like, oh, I got to go back to hospital, this is not good, this is not good. And I didn't think that of him. I actually didn't. I thought, he would have just, you know, swept that aside, but he actually got scared by a drop of blood, you know. Those are those kind of things. You know, we are all human. You may look like the greatest leader in the world, but at the end of the day, a drop of blood still worries you a little bit, doesn't it? So is that what you were trying to get out of this? The human, real human side of this man?
Definitely. I think this is a side of Madiba people are not familiar with. We're familiar with the leader, the negotiator. But this side of Madiba, the grandparent who chastises grandchildren for losing a pair of running shoes or a piece of school uniform. We can all identify with that.
We can. And very strict.
Yes.
I didn't realize how strict he was. Apparently, he made one of his grandchildren go and stand outside with his arms out with a blanket on him because he'd lost his school uniform. I'm going to remember that lesson, I think, just to think about what he had done wrong. But, you know, the greater purpose of it all, let's start off at the beginning, because the first story is Mac Maharaj. And, you know, this is more of a high-profile individual to start off this book. What made you think this was the first story to begin with that was sort of the right way to go?
Well, I think we tried to do it generally chronologically, and Mac, as well as serving in Madiba's cabinet, was in prison with him. Yeah. And he starts off remembering the naughty Madiba and goes back into prison and remembers the strong, very principled leader. And then he becomes quite serious. And I think it's really important for people to see that this man came from hardship. Into the leader he became, and the relaxed, fun guy.
Yeah, I mean, you start off by in this beginning is all about literally making him wear a penguin suit because he was going to meet with the Queen, and Madiba was giggling because they were all wearing these long coats and tails and, you know, shirts looking like robots or whatever, and Madiba wearing his silk
normal
shirt and normal attire and giggling at them. But that's your leader and you do it at his behest. But I think it was more profound to hear the inside scoop of what was happening in prison as well, and what they were feeling. Like you're saying, you know, it wasn't just about the leader, it was also about the man in prison, and how hard it was for them watching their family suffer. Perhaps a side that we tend to forget when we don't read these stories.
I think for us, basically, we just wanted to bring stories that staff wanted to share. So it's their remembrances of Madiba, them remembering moments that they'd spent with Madiba to show that very human side of him.
Sahm, you're very close to the family. Well, you know them. I mean, you work at the foundation as well, so you interact with them. What are their views? What do they think about the book and some of the stories that have been told?
You know, we haven't actually engaged much on it because it's still the mourning period for Mum Winnie.
Okay.
So I think we're being very respectful of that. I'm sure, well, Indileka came to a couple of our launches and she spoke. She's his first grandchild, and she spoke about how they used to get very irritated that the staff stood in their way of seeing Madiba, because they had to make appointments and they had to get past the staff to see their own grandfather. So she did offer that, but we haven't had a lot of discussions yet about the book.
I can imagine, and I suppose this is more of it's not too much the family side, is it? This is very much so the staff side. I mean, if you look at some of the people that shared, you've got somebody named Jan van der Walt. He was a medic that worked with him. Jason Shabalala and Mkhonto Wesizwe operative, which we know, and he built Madiba's protection structure. So, you know, the people that you focused in on here, how did you sort of get to bring them on and decide which stories that you were going to cover or not?
So we actually opened it up to all of our staff. We sent messages, emails to staff who had attended the teas. Some of them were really great and they helped us make contact with staff who had left, who had moved on to other jobs and positions. And some people were really great. They sent through their stories immediately. Some took a little bit longer.
Or as people do.
And some chose not to share their stories. But we opened it up to everybody. There are so many people that have worked with Madiba over the years, but we were only able to get, I think, these stories in because we had a very specific word count from our publishers. So we hope that these represent the multitudes of people that have worked for Madiba.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, it's a kind of book that I really would love to actually read just a short story to my kids every night. That's how easy reading it is. And it's got everyone. I mean, there's even Jessie Duarte sharing her stories, Faizo Musa, Toko Mavuso. I mean, there is a host. I don't know how many stories are in here, by the way.
We don't know how many stories. There are 111 people.
111
times
people.
By lots, so probably 1,000.
Okay, 1,000 stories that have more than 1,000 lessons in them. Thank you for talking to us, ladies. It's a pleasure, and well done on the book.
Thank you
it's
so
a
much.
really nice keepsake and a beautiful thing to have and read and just learn some lessons out of it. Editors Vimla, Naidoo and Sahm joining us here on the program to discuss this new book, I Remember Nelson